Welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I invite you to settle into a calm and comfortable space as we drift back in time together into a world that feels familiar from movies and novels, yet was far more demanding than most people ever imagine. In this episode, we will open the grand doors of a Victorian mansion and step quietly into the daily reality of the young women who worked as maids, moving through silent hallways and waking long before the house itself began to stir. Before you relax and listen, picture for a moment the image many people hold in their minds when they think of Victorian life: sparkling chandeliers, elegant dinners, polished silver, soft candlelight, and graceful routines that appear effortless to the eye. But behind that polished world stood a hidden workforce, and every shining surface was the result of someone unseen, someone whose story rarely appears in history books. Our goal tonight is to travel behind those walls and understand what life truly felt like for a typical maid in a large Victorian household. These women lived under strict rules, tight schedules, and endless expectations, and yet they also carried with them quiet strength, endurance, and personal dreams that reached beyond the walls of the mansion. As you listen, let your imagination follow the rhythm of their days, from the first cold moments of dawn to the final quiet hour of night when the world above stairs finally slept. Imagine opening your eyes before the sun. In a small attic room with a slanted ceiling, a single candle, and a uniform laid out on a chair. The air is cold, the floor even colder, and you must rise immediately because your day begins not when you feel ready, but when the house demands it. You have only a few minutes to wake up, dress, wash, and gather yourself before rushing into your duties, and every second matters, because the household runs on precision. There is no pause button, no delay, and no room for hesitation. The mansion expects you to move like clockwork, even if your body aches from the day before. Your uniform is plain, dark, and modest, chosen not for comfort, but to make you almost invisible, so that you blend into the background of the grand estate. Once dressed, you make your way down steep staircases in near darkness, guided by memory rather than light, careful not to make a sound. Silence is part of the job. The residents of the house, still asleep in their warm beds, must never be disturbed. Your first tasks await in the kitchen, where water must be boiled, fires must be lit, and the house must be awakened gently and perfectly, room by room, chore by chore. There is no applause for this work and no audience, yet every detail counts, because even the smallest oversight could lead to reprimand or suspicion. A maid learned quickly that success meant being unnoticed, because to be invisible was to be considered efficient. While the world above stairs enjoyed comfort, the world below stairs ran on discipline, repetition, and quiet coordination. Even though each day was long and demanding, there was little time for personal rest. Breakfast had to be prepared, rooms had to be cleaned, carpets brushed, floors scrubbed, silver polished, mattresses shaken, and fires maintained, all while responding instantly to ringing bells that signaled new instructions without explanation. The pressure of constant work shaped not only the maid's schedule, but also her thoughts, emotions, and sense of identity. Over time, many maids learned to move quickly, speak softly, think ahead, and anticipate needs before they were spoken aloud. They became experts in routines that few outside their world ever witnessed. It is easy for us today to look back and imagine the Victorian era as a romantic chapter in history, filled with charm and refinement, but the reality for servants was far less glamorous. Most maids came from humble backgrounds and worked not for praise, but because it was one of the few respectable paths available to a young woman seeking stability or the hope of supporting her family. Though they lived in luxurious houses, the luxury was never theirs to experience. They lived in the shadows of that luxury, creating it for others while having very little of their own. Yet, despite the challenges, there were moments of humanity that brightened their days, shared laughter in the servants' hall, a warm cup of tea before sunrise, a friendly glance from another maid after a long task, or a short letter from home that reminded them of life beyond the mansion walls. These small moments of connection helped them endure the weight of their responsibilities. So tonight, as you listen and imagine their world, think not just about the elegance of the Victorian mansion, but about the countless footsteps, steady hands, and dedicated hours hidden behind it. Our story begins where the chandeliers end, in the quiet corridors where the maids walked each morning, preparing the house long before anyone upstairs opened their eyes. Now, take a slow breath, relax your shoulders, and allow the story to unfold as we journey into a single day in the life of a Victorian maid, beginning in the earliest hours of dawn, when only the faintest light touches the sky and the rest of the world is still asleep. The morning truly begins the moment the first bell rings through the corridors like a soft but undeniable command from another world. You pause for only a breath, because hesitation is a luxury you cannot afford. And then your footsteps are already moving in the direction of the sound. Every bell has a tone, and with time, a maid learns to recognize each one by ear, understanding which room needs attention without even looking at the panel. This is not simply a house. It is a system, a living rhythm, and every servant must move in harmony with it to keep the day from unraveling. You carry a jug of hot water in both hands, concentrating on each step as you climb a long staircase designed for elegance, not practicality. The surface is polished, glossy, and treacherous for tired feet, yet you must move with grace, as though weightless and silent. At the top of the stairs, the hallway is still half dark, and the air holds the quiet of a house not yet awake, a brief moment between sleep and expectation. You walk quickly, but never in a rush that shows on your face, because a maid is expected to be swift without ever appearing hurried. When you reach the first bedroom, you place the jug gently, knock with practiced politeness, and slip inside only when permission is implied by silence. You move like a shadow, drawing curtains just enough to let in pale morning light, setting out the washstand tools, and preparing the space for the day ahead. Within minutes, you are gone again, headed to the next room, because the bells do not ring one at a time for your convenience. Each task must be completed without calling attention to the person completing it, and this is the paradox of service: the better you are, the less anyone seems to notice you. Down the stairs you go again, retrieving fresh towels, polished shoes, or breakfast trays, your steps memorizing the path long before your thoughts are fully awake. The kitchen below is already alive with its own early morning urgency, fire crackling underneath iron pots as the cook stirs, directs, and mutters about timing. You collect a tray and lift it with care, balancing teapot, cup, small plate, and folded napkin, every piece aligned like a composition that must not tremble. Then you are off once more, gliding up the stairs as though pulled by invisible strings, answering a silent race that only the servants understand. By now, the children are beginning to stir, and faint noises drift from the nursery, a yawn, a protest, a sleepy complaint. Soon you will be tidying their rooms, folding their clothes, or calming their morning chaos with patience that is rarely acknowledged. Before that moment arrives, however, the mistress expects her tea, and you step into her room with lowered eyes and a voice as soft as linen. You place the tray, check the curtains, adjust a pillow, and retreat before a single question can be asked, because perfection in this house is wordless. When you return to the hallway, another bell rings, and then another, and the morning begins to tilt into full momentum. This is the rhythm that shapes the life of a Victorian maid: constant movement, constant listening, constant awareness. Even breakfast for the family is a performance requiring precision. And though you will not sit at the table, you will be responsible for its calm. You hurry to the dining room, straighten the cloth, adjust the position of each plate by the width of a fingertip, and make sure not a single speck disturbs the polished surface. Soon the family will enter, speaking quietly, reading letters, or discussing plans, unaware of how many hands made this peaceful moment possible. As you stand by the door, ready to pour tea or replace bread, you must remain still yet fully alert, your thoughts attentive to every subtle change. You have been awake for hours, and yet the day is only beginning, with 12 or more hours still ahead of you. The bells will continue, the tasks will multiply, and there will be no moment in which you choose what comes next. But even in this demanding routine, there are small rewards that help you endure. Sometimes it is the warm aroma of fresh bread drifting from the kitchen, reminding you of comforts you rarely taste. Sometimes it is a quiet nod from the housekeeper, not quite a smile but close enough to feel like one. Sometimes it is the sunlight resting on the staircase for a brief moment when no one else is around to see it. And sometimes it is the silent strength you feel in knowing that without you, the house would falter before noon. The world above stairs appears calm only because the world below stairs moves with disciplined urgency. You learn to accept that your work will never be celebrated, and yet you also discover a quiet pride in simply doing it well. For a maid, pride is not spoken. It is folded into every corner of a perfectly made bed and polished into every surface that shines before breakfast. By mid-morning, you have already worked more hours than many people will work in an entire day, and you are expected to continue without pause. There is no fanfare, no applause, and no break, but there is structure, and sometimes structure itself becomes a strange source of comfort. As you step into the corridor again, another bell rings in the distance, and though you are tired, your feet are already moving. Because this is the life of a maid in a Victorian mansion, early mornings, endless tasks, the constant call of the bell, and a quiet determination that carries you from hour to hour. And so the morning continues. Not by your timing, but by the house's timing, and you follow it because you must, and because there is no other way for the day to unfold. By the time breakfast has finished and the dining room has finally been cleared, the mansion shifts into its true daytime rhythm, and the work below stairs rises to meet it. You return to the servants' hall for only a brief moment, perhaps long enough to sip a warm drink or swallow a single bite of bread. But even in this short pause, your ears stay alert for the next bell. There is no real rest, only interludes between tasks, and soon you rise again to begin the long cycle of cleaning that defines much of the morning. Down the corridor you go, carrying brushes, cloths, and polish, ready to wage another round in the never-ending battle against dust. Dust gathers no matter how many times you chase it away, drifting across polished wood, settling into carved corners, and mocking the effort it takes to keep a grand house spotless. You move from room to room, dusting high shelves, sweeping staircases, shaking rugs, and brightening brass fixtures until they shine like small suns in the filtered daylight. The drawing room requires special attention, because it is where guests will drink tea, exchange pleasantries, and judge the household with sharper eyes than they will ever admit. You dust the mantel carefully, pass your cloth along the piano, straighten the cushions, and adjust a vase by no more than a breath, because beauty in these rooms is measured in tiny details. Every task must be completed without complaint, without noise, and without any sign of how tiring this constant movement truly is. Then comes the more demanding work. The kind that stains the hands and tightens the muscles, beginning in the scullery where piles of dishes wait like a small mountain of obligation. The kitchen maid nods as you step in, and together you begin to scrub, rinse, and stack, each of you working with practiced rhythm to reduce the chaos left behind by breakfast. The water is hot, the soap is harsh, and steam clouds your vision as you clean plate after plate, cup after cup, utensil after utensil. It is work that leaves no visible glory, because once the dishes are returned to the shelf, no one thinks of the hands that scrubbed them. Yet it must be done, and done quickly, because there are many hours left in the day and the list of duties only grows longer. When the dishes are finally cleared, you move on to sweeping floors, shaking out ashes, and polishing doorknobs that catch the light like coins. Not a step of this work is optional. Because in a house of status, the smallest imperfection becomes a topic of conversation. By midday, your back aches, your fingers sting, and your sleeves carry faint marks of the efforts you cannot hide, but there is no time to slow down. Next comes the laundry, another world of labor entirely, where linens, shirts, and sheets must be washed, boiled, scrubbed, rinsed, blued, wrung out, dried, folded, and often ironed before the day is done. You lift heavy baskets and lower them again, your arms growing sore as you work through fabric made heavier by water, guided by nothing more than duty and determination. The laundry room is hot and damp, and every surface glistens with moisture, turning the air into a warm fog that clings to your skin. No one sees the sweat that gathers there, no one hears the strain in your breath. And no one praises the effort it takes to restore every piece of fabric to perfect cleanliness. When the linens are hung to dry, you look down the long line of cloth like banners of expectation, knowing each one must later be pressed into crisp perfection. Before you can even think of that stage, another bell rings, and you wipe your hands quickly, leaving the damp room for yet another task. Now you must prepare the fireplaces, clearing old ashes and stacking fresh coal so the rooms will feel warm when the family returns later. The work is dusty and dark, and as you kneel on the floor, you remember that every glowing fire upstairs begins with a pair of tired hands downstairs. Once the fires are set, you carry fresh water to the upstairs rooms, balancing buckets and pitchers with careful steps, because a single splash on the carpet could become a scolding you will not forget. On your way back down, you pass portraits on the wall, the painted faces of unfamiliar ancestors staring outward as though they own not just the house, but your time as well. The house is beautiful, yes, but it is also heavy, and its silence sometimes feels louder than noise. In these long hours between morning and afternoon, the housekeeper appears often, checking corners, running her fingers across stair rails, and issuing orders with cool precision. She expects discipline, accuracy, and speed, and though her voice may sound calm, every maid knows she can dismiss with a sentence. So you nod, obey, and continue walking, cleaning, lifting, and polishing, until the house looks as though it cleans itself. In the rare moments when you pause, perhaps near a window, you might catch a glimpse of sunlight on the garden, a reminder that the world outside keeps turning with or without your effort. Sometimes, for just a breath, you allow yourself to imagine sitting on the grass with a warm breeze on your face, free from bells, duties, and rules. But the moment ends quickly, because reality in a Victorian household leaves no room for wandering thoughts. Your mind returns to the list of tasks, your steps return to the hallway, and your hands return to the tools of your trade. Below stairs, life is built on routine, repetition, and resilience, and even as exhaustion settles over your shoulders, you keep moving, because there is no other choice. And so the middle of the day approaches, not with rest, but with the knowledge that much work is still ahead, and the afternoon will demand just as much strength as the morning already has. By early afternoon, the mansion settles into a quieter rhythm, but for a maid, this is not a time of rest. Only a change in the type of work that fills the hours. You move through hallways that now seem calm on the surface, yet every room still holds a list of tasks waiting to be completed before evening arrives. There are fresh instructions from the housekeeper, spoken in a measured tone that leaves no room for misunderstanding or delay. You listen carefully, nod in acknowledgement, and continue forward with steady steps. Because accuracy is as important as speed in a household that notices everything. The rules that guide your day are not written on paper, yet they might as well be carved into stone, for every servant learns them quickly and lives by them without question. Silence when upstairs, precision in all things, and absolute respect for the hierarchy that shapes life in every Victorian home of status. You are expected to walk without rushing. Speak only when spoken to, and complete each task as though it were the most important moment of the day. There is no room for clumsy movements, raised voices, or visible frustration, because composure is part of the uniform, just like the apron tied around your waist. Mistakes are rarely forgotten, and even a small misstep can follow a maid for weeks, whispered through rooms and hallways by those who measure worth in flawless routine. The fear of disappointing the housekeeper or the mistress becomes a silent companion, shaping your awareness, your posture, and even the way you breathe in certain rooms. This pressure is constant, yet you learn to carry it with quiet dignity, developing a kind of inner strength that only grows with each demanding day. From time to time, the strain of perfection shows itself in tired eyes or trembling hands, but a maid must steady herself quickly, for there is always more work waiting. You sweep through the main hall once again, checking surfaces that were already cleaned earlier, because in a house of status, nothing is ever considered clean enough. You straighten portraits, adjust the angle of decorative pieces, and smooth every wrinkle from curtains and drapes as though they are part of a stage still preparing for its evening performance. Sometimes you wonder how many people outside this world realize how much effort it takes to maintain the illusion of effortless beauty. Work continues in the kitchen as well, where preparations for evening meals begin long before the family ever sits down to dine. The cook and kitchen maids move with practiced coordination, and when they ask for help, you step in without hesitation, washing, carrying, or fetching whatever is needed to keep the rhythm steady. By now, your feet are sore from constant walking, and your arms ache from lifting, yet there is no opportunity to pause. Because productivity is part of survival. Even small signs of fatigue must be hidden, for servants are expected to be tireless, and tiredness is not considered an excuse in a house that runs on discipline. You learn how to conserve energy in quiet ways, taking smaller breaths, slowing your thoughts, and letting muscle memory guide each motion so that your mind can rest while your body continues. In the library, you dust shelves once more, breathing in the faint scent of old paper and polished wood as sunlight filters through tall windows that you will soon need to clean again. You pause only long enough to ensure no speck has escaped your cloth, then move on to the next task, and the next, and the next. A maid's day is not measured by hours but by accomplishments that fade as quickly as they are completed, leaving no trace, only new demands. Yet despite the constant rushing, there are still rules of posture, speech, and movement that you must follow without fail, because respectability in service is built on discipline as much as labor. Even the simplest interaction with a family member requires careful attention, a lowered gaze, a gentle tone, a precise curtsy, and an unspoken promise of obedience. The house may glitter and glow, but it is also a map of boundaries that cannot be crossed, no matter how tired or overwhelmed you might feel. Over time, these rules weave themselves into your thoughts until they feel natural, and you perform them without effort, as though they are part of who you are. Still, there are moments when you remember you are more than your tasks, more than the bells and rules and expectations, and in those moments, you hold tightly to a quiet sense of self. Perhaps you think of home, of family, of younger days before uniforms and schedules, and for a single heartbeat, the weight of the day grows lighter. Then another bell rings, and the moment is over, and your feet are moving again because that is the life of a Victorian maid, controlled by duty, defined by routine, and strengthened by endurance. As the afternoon light begins to fade, you know the most demanding part of the evening still lies ahead, and the mansion will soon awaken again in its own grand, glittering way. As the afternoon deepens and the sun begins its slow descent across the sky, the mansion prepares for a brief and deceptive quiet, but for the maids, there is still no thought of stopping. You move through the house with practiced focus, knowing that even though the morning rush has passed, the evening demands will soon arrive with equal intensity. Before those hours begin, there are tasks below stairs that must be completed, and many of them are far less elegant than anything seen above. One of the least pleasant responsibilities belongs to the scullery, where pots, pans, and utensils pile high after every meal, waiting for hands that never truly rest. You roll up your sleeves and step into the warm, steamy space, greeting the scullery maid with a sympathetic glance that needs no words. Together, you face the mountain of dishes, working through them with steady movements and a shared understanding of the labor that never ends. The water is hot, the soap is rough, and each pan seems heavier than the last, but you keep scrubbing, rinsing, and stacking with careful rhythm. Steam fogs the window and softens the edges of the world around you, blurring time itself as plates and cups pass through your hands by the dozen. No guest will ever imagine this scene, and no family member will ever picture the heat, the effort, or the aching hands behind their spotless table settings. When the last dish is finally cleaned, you exhale with quiet relief, even though you know the next meal will undo this work and begin the cycle again. From the scullery, you move to the laundry room, where damp linen still wait to be checked, folded, or prepared for ironing. You smooth each cloth, careful to remove every crease, because perfection is expected even in the smallest corners of the household. The scent of soap lingers in the air, mixing with traces of coal and candle wax, creating a signature smell found only below stairs. Once the linens are folded, you sweep the floor and prepare fresh buckets of water, knowing that cleanup is part of every task, no matter how minor. Then it is time to tend to the fireplaces once more, clearing ash and arranging coal so that the evening rooms will look warm and inviting when the family gathers later. You kneel beside each hearth and work quietly, brushing away soot and shaping the coal into a careful stack that will catch flame with elegance. Downstairs labor builds upstairs comfort. And though the contrast is stark, you learn to accept it without bitterness. After the fireplaces, you return to the hallway, where the floor must be swept again to erase the traces of ash and dust brought up from below. Even the stair rail must be polished, because hands will soon slide along its gleaming surface as guests move through the house without a care. In these hours, the house feels like a great stage preparing for an evening performance. And every servant becomes part of an unseen cast ensuring that the scene is flawless. Before the family reappears, you hurry to your small room long enough to smooth your hair and straighten your apron, restoring order to your appearance. A maid must always look composed, no matter how many tasks fill her day, because the uniform is part of the illusion of effortlessness. You take a breath, let your shoulders relax, and close your eyes for a few seconds of borrowed stillness. Then you descend again, ready for the next demand, just as the first of the evening bells begins to ring. This bell carries a different tone from the morning chimes, signaling preparation rather than urgency, but it still commands immediate attention. You move toward the sound, adjusting lamps and trimming wicks so that each room will glow with warm golden light. Soon the mansion will come alive with voices, footsteps, and conversation, and it is your job to ensure that everything looks perfect before a single guest arrives. As you walk through the rooms, you pause to straighten a cushion here, adjust a curtain there, and scatter a hint of fragrance so the air feels fresh and welcoming. Each detail matters, because evening in a Victorian home is a ritual of display, and the staff works tirelessly to maintain the illusion of ease and refinement. Below stairs, the kitchen grows busier by the minute, filled with the clatter of pans, the bubbling of pots, and the brisk instructions of the cook. You return to lend a hand, knowing that the evening meal must be prepared with precision, timing, and grace to match the expectations of the family above. There are trays to polish, plates to warm, and ingredients to fetch, and you complete each motion with calm determination. Even as your body grows weary, your mind remains alert, trained by repetition and responsibility to remain focused until the final task is done. This is the nature of service: long hours, steady labor, and the quiet strength of doing work that most will never see or acknowledge. Yet in this demanding rhythm, you find a sense of purpose, knowing that your efforts hold the household together from morning until night. When the final preparations for the evening are complete, you step back and look around at the polished tables, glowing lamps, and neatly arranged rooms. For a brief moment, you allow yourself to feel proud of what your hands have accomplished, even if no one else will say a word about it. Because in the world of a Victorian maid, satisfaction must come from within, built from effort, endurance, and the quiet belief that dignity can exist even in the shadows of service. And as the clock approaches evening, you prepare to return upstairs, ready to face the next chapter of the day with the same resilience that has carried you since dawn. As evening approaches and the sky dims into soft shades of blue and gold, the mansion begins to shift once more from quiet preparation into polished presentation. You return upstairs with careful composure, ready to assist in one of the most delicate rituals of the household: the evening meal. The dining room, now glowing with lamplight and warm reflections on polished silver, must appear calm, inviting, and effortlessly elegant. You adjust the final details on the table, smoothing the cloth with your fingertips, ensuring that each piece of cutlery sits at the correct angle. The air carries the faint scent of flowers arranged earlier in the afternoon, a quiet decoration meant to please the eyes without drawing attention to itself. Soon the family will gather. And although their voices will fill the room, your presence must remain unobtrusive, steady, and perfectly timed. The butler gives a subtle nod, and you take your place by the wall, ready to move only when needed, silent and attentive. When the family enters, their conversation drifts through the room like a gentle wave, yet you must never react to a single word, no matter what you hear. Your hands move with instinctive precision, pouring tea, offering bread, or clearing a plate in seamless rhythm with the meal. You walk the floor in calm, quiet steps, circling the table like a steady orbit, careful not to interrupt or distract. Dinner upstairs is a performance of grace, but below stairs, the kitchen continues to pulse with urgency, preparing each course in perfect sequence. Between trips to the dining room, you return to the kitchen for the next tray, greeted by heat, clatter, and the cook's focused expression. You lift each dish with care, knowing that one slip or one spill could unravel the illusion of peace in an instant. Back upstairs, you serve again, attentive to every small gesture that signals a request, a glance, a slight movement, a lifted hand. Words from you are rarely needed, because the language of service is built on anticipation, silence, and presence. When the final course is finished and the family withdraws to the drawing room, you gather the plates and silver, setting them gently onto trays for the journey below. Your arms grow tired, but your movements remain steady, for there is still much to do before the night can truly begin. Back in the kitchen, the team works together to clear the remnants of the meal, stacking dishes and wiping surfaces in swift and practiced motions. It is not glamorous work, but the rhythm of shared effort brings a small sense of camaraderie to the end of a long day. Once the dining room is restored to order, you move through the lower corridors again, answering small tasks that continue to appear like unanswered notes. There are lamps to refill, wicks to trim, and curtains to draw before the house settles into its nighttime atmosphere. You carry a small tray of candles and matches, lighting each lamp in turn, watching soft light bloom along the walls like evening blossoms. This hour can be strangely peaceful, a brief moment when the demands of the house grow gentler, and the halls feel less like a stage and more like a quiet world of their own. Sometimes you catch your reflection in a window, the tidy uniform, the calm expression, the posture of someone who has learned to stand with grace despite fatigue. In that reflection, you see the truth that few above stairs will ever understand: strength does not always speak, and endurance does not always shout. When the family settles into the drawing room, you stand by once more, ready to serve tea or retrieve a shawl when the night air turns cool. Their laughter rises and falls in gentle waves, carrying stories, opinions, and plans that may never concern you, yet will always fill the spaces you maintain. You are close enough to hear every word, yet distant enough to remain outside the circle entirely, living in a world that moves parallel to theirs but never truly meets it. Hours pass in this twilight rhythm, and at last the drawing room empties, the voices fade, and the house begins to grow still. You clear the final cups, straighten the final cushions, and dim the final lamp until only a soft glow remains. The mansion now rests, serene and spotless, as though it achieved this state by magic rather than labor. And quietly, you slip back below stairs, knowing that the calm above exists only because of the effort below. There is comfort in this understanding, even if the world never acknowledges it aloud. For a maid, the reward is not applause, but the quiet knowledge that the rhythm of the house continues because you carried it through another day. When the final echoes of conversation fade and the house climbs into silence, the true stillness of night begins, but for a maid, the day is not yet finished. You walk the dim corridors once more, listening to the soft hum of a mansion settling into sleep, its wooden beams gently sighing in the cool night air. There are fires to check, embers to bank, and lamps to extinguish or refill so that the halls will be safe until morning returns. With careful steps, you move through each room. Guided by memory rather than light, your hands steady as you trim a wick or close a window against the breeze. The night work requires a different rhythm, not rushed like the morning, not urgent like the evening, but slow, methodical, and almost meditative. The bell system still hangs on the wall below stairs, and although most bells will remain silent at this hour, you never allow yourself to relax completely. Any ring in the night means someone needs something, and you must be ready to answer before the sound even fades. You carry a lantern as you walk, its warm glow creating small islands of light in the long dark passages that stretch ahead of you like quiet tunnels. Sometimes you hear nothing but your own soft breath and the distant ticking of a clock somewhere deep inside the house. Other times, you hear the faint creak of a floorboard or the rustle of curtains shifting in a draft. And the sound reminds you how large the mansion truly is. Night can make the house feel like its own world, apart from everything else, a maze of rooms and staircases that you alone continue to navigate while others rest. You move through the drawing room, straightening a chair that has tilted, smoothing out a wrinkle in the rug, and ensuring that every surface remains as flawless as it was before the lamps were dimmed. Then you continue into the main hall, where moonlight spills through tall windows and lays a silver pattern across the polished floor. You pause there for a moment, letting the quiet embrace you, feeling the softness of the hour settle over your tired shoulders. It is in these late moments that the house finally feels gentle, no longer demanding but simply resting, and you can almost believe you are resting with it. After checking the final fire, you return below stairs, where the other maids have already begun preparing for a brief and precious sleep. Their voices are low, their movements slow, their faces marked by the fatigue of a day spent in constant motion. You hang your apron, fold it neatly, and wash your hands and face, letting warm water erase at least a small part of the day's strain. Then you change into your night dress, grateful for fabric that finally allows your body to breathe and relax. Before heading to your narrow bed in the attic, you take a moment to glance at the clock and consider how little time remains before dawn will call you back to duty. Sleep is not a luxury for a maid. It is a brief pause in the long script of labor that continues day after day without intermission. You climb the silent staircase to the upper floor where the servants sleep, feeling each step in your tired legs, yet also feeling a quiet pride that you have made it through another long day. Your small room waits for you. Simple and bare, with a thin blanket, a small wooden chair, and perhaps one cherished keepsake from home. As you lie down, the night wraps around you, cool and still, and for a few minutes you let your eyes close, knowing your rest will be short but necessary. Outside the small attic window, the stars glow faintly, and the world beyond the mansion seems distant and unreal, like a dream you may never fully touch. But even in such a life, hope does not disappear. It simply becomes quieter, settling into the heart like a steady ember that never fully dies. You breathe slowly and deeply, letting the last thoughts of work fade, and allow sleep to take you at last, if only for a handful of fragile hours. Because soon another day will begin, and with it, the bells, the staircases, the duties, and the endless rhythm of service will return once more. Morning always returns faster than expected. And before the sky has fully brightened, the mansion awakens with a familiar series of demands. For a maid, the day begins not with choices but with bells, routine, and the unbroken chain of responsibilities that link yesterday to today. There is barely time to shake off sleep before your feet hit the cold floor, reminding you that rest is never more than a brief intermission in a much longer play. By the time you descend below stairs, the household rhythm has already begun, and the invisible machinery of service is turning once again. But there is one place where that rhythm feels different: the servants' hall, the secret world beneath the grand rooms, where life unfolds out of sight. Here, hierarchy still exists, but it breathes, shifts, and bends in ways that the rigid world above stairs never allows. This is where the staff gathers for meals, for brief conversations, and for the small moments of humanity that keep them going. Laughter, whispers, frustration, and exhaustion all share the same table, stitched together by camaraderie and necessity. The butler sits at the head, silent and dignified, a quiet center of gravity in this hidden universe. Beside him, the housekeeper oversees order with stern composure, ensuring discipline even in moments of rest. Yet among the younger servants, glances and smiles travel quickly, carrying jokes, complaints, and unspoken alliances through the room. In the servants' hall, you are not a shadow or a silent pair of hands, you are part of a community, imperfect but real. There is gossip, of course, rolling from voice to voice with remarkable speed, threading into every corner of conversation. Stories of the household ripple through the group: a misplaced letter, an unexpected guest, a broken vase, a mysterious remark overheard upstairs. Some tales are funny, some are frustrating, and some are guarded carefully beneath lowered voices and watchful eyes. For all its noise, however, this hall is still governed by unspoken rules, where loyalty is currency and trust is never given lightly. Arguments flare and cool again, just as quickly as the passing of a teapot or the clatter of a dish set down too firmly. Every servant has their own burdens, their own dreams, their own private history, yet here they face the world together, shoulder to shoulder. The hall becomes the only place where sighs are safe, where tired eyes can be honest, and where someone will notice if your spirit begins to dim. Meals are simple: thick bread, strong tea, maybe jam if fortune is kind, but shared food becomes shared strength. Even quiet moments hold meaning: a warm cup between cold hands, a sympathetic nod after a hard morning, or a brief laugh that makes the next task easier to bear. No matter how heavy the work above stairs becomes, the servants' hall reminds you that you are not alone in carrying it. It is a place of refuge, but also a place of strategy, where the day's battles are discussed and the next challenges anticipated. Here you learn who is dependable, who is unpredictable, and who must be approached with caution when tempers run thin. Friendships form in the space between exhaustion and endurance, and those friendships become lifelines when the days grow long. When the bell rings again, everyone rises at once, returning to their duties as though an unseen curtain has lifted. The room empties, the clatter fades, and silence settles once more, waiting for the next return. And as you resume your work, you carry with you the memory of that brief moment of belonging, enough to steady your steps through the grand, indifferent halls above. Laundry day arrives without fanfare, but every maid feels its weight long before the first basket is lifted. The piles of linen seem endless, like soft white hills that never stop rising no matter how many folds you conquer. Sheets, shirts, napkins, towels, aprons, each one carries traces of the household. From spilled tea to muddy fingerprints left behind by restless children. Laundry is not glamorous work. It is a slow, demanding battle fought with soap, steam, and strained muscles. The washroom fills with heat as kettles boil and tubs are dragged into place, ready for another round of soaking and scrubbing. Your hands plunge into hot water again and again, until the sensation blurs between discomfort and numb determination. The scent of lye and damp cloth becomes the air you breathe, sinking into your hair, your sleeves, and your thoughts. Scrubbing boards creak beneath steady hands, marking time in rough, repetitive strokes that grind away both dirt and energy. There is no shortcut, no haste, no clever trick to finish faster. Laundry yields only to persistence, never impatience. Once washed, the linens are rinsed in cold water that bites at your skin, a sharp contrast to the heat that came before. Water drips onto the stone floor, forming small rivers that snake between boots and buckets, pooling in quiet corners of the room. Next comes wringing, twisting heavy cloth until your arms ache and your wrists throb from the effort. Then the laundry is carried outside to the lines, where fresh air and sunlight must finish what soap and scrubbing began. On windy days, the linens snap like sails, tugging against the pegs as though trying to escape their fate. On still days, they hang without motion, pale flags of labor fluttering gently beneath the open sky. You stand among them, adjusting a cloth here, tightening a peg there, watching the wind and weather decide how kind or unkind the afternoon will be. When rain threatens, there is a frantic rush to rescue everything before the sky unwrites an entire day's work. If the weather holds, the linens dry in calm rows, glowing soft and clean in the fading light. But even then, your work is not finished. Once gathered back inside, each item must be ironed, folded, and stacked with perfect symmetry, crisp edges, smooth lines, no hint of a crease. The iron in your hand is heavy, warmed on the stove until its heat spreads through the fabric and into your arms. Steam curls upward in tiny wisps, vanishing as quickly as it appears, leaving behind the sharp scent of hot cotton and metal. You press each corner, guiding the fabric into obedience, transforming crumpled cloth into order and elegance. Hours pass in a haze of repetition, and the room grows warmer with every movement of the iron. By late afternoon, your back aches, your shoulders tighten, and your fingertips feel worn from constant contact with cloth and heat. Yet there is a quiet satisfaction in the growing stacks of folded linens, tall, neat, and shining with the proof of your effort. No one above stairs will ever see the blisters, the steam, or the strain that shaped those perfect folds. They will see only the result, smooth sheets, spotless napkins, and a table set as flawlessly as if it required no work at all. When the last cloth is finally stored away, you exhale and close the cupboard with gentle hands, knowing it will all begin again soon. Laundry is endless, but it teaches endurance, the steady strength to face a task not once, but over and over, without complaint. And in that rhythm, you find a kind of peace, small and quiet, yet strong enough to carry you into the next demanding day. Serving guests is one of the most delicate tasks in a Victorian household, because it demands both perfect manners and near invisibility. When visitors arrive, the entire mansion changes its rhythm, shifting into a careful performance where every servant becomes part of a silent, moving backdrop. You stand ready near the hall, listening for instructions, aware that even the smallest action must be done with grace. Coats are received, gloves are collected, and shoes are quietly inspected for stray mud before the guests ever step beyond the doorway. Their voices rise in polite greetings, filling the entrance with warmth, while you move quietly at the edge of the scene, guiding their belongings away. In these moments, you become an observer of a world that is refined, polished, and utterly separate from your own daily life. Once the guests are seated in the drawing room, tea service begins, and your focus sharpens like a steady flame. A silver tray rests in your hands, and every cup, saucer, and spoon must be placed with elegant precision. The teapot must be poured smoothly, without a single drop spilling onto the cloth or clinking too loudly against porcelain. You offer sugar and milk as conversation drifts around you, discussing weather, travel, and society as though the world contains no heavier burdens. Your posture stays straight, your step stays soft, and your expression remains calm, no matter how tired your body feels beneath the uniform. When refreshments are finished, plates disappear as quietly as they arrived, whisked away before crumbs or cups can disrupt the illusion of elegance. Later in the evening, dinners with guests demand even greater coordination. You stand behind chairs, waiting for the butler's nod, moving in unison with the rest of the staff to present each course at the exact same moment. Timing becomes everything, because one mistimed movement can break the spell that the household works so hard to maintain. Guests laugh, toast, and share lively stories while you glide between chairs, refilling glasses and clearing dishes with practiced rhythm. Though you say little, you hear much: the secrets, the humor, the opinions, and the small tensions that lace their conversations. You carry those moments in silence, knowing that the walls above stairs may have ears, but the staff must never have a voice. After dinner, dessert and drinks follow, and the evening stretches on beneath golden light, polished silver, and soft music from the corner of the room. When the guests stand to leave, you return their coats and belongings, placing each item in their hands as though it were newly purchased that very day. Polite farewells echo through the hall, and you bow your head respectfully, even as your feet throb beneath you. Once the door finally closes and the night air slips back into the entryway, the mansion exhales a long, invisible breath. You begin the quiet work of resetting each room, folding cloths, collecting glasses, straightening cushions, and sweeping away the traces of their visit. By the time everything is restored to perfect order, it is as though the guests were never there at all. The lamps burn low, the tea trays return to storage, and silence settles again over the polished floors. You step back to admire the room for just a moment. Not out of pride, but out of relief that nothing went wrong. Serving guests is a test of poise, patience, and endurance, and tonight, you pass that test once more. Then, without ceremony, you move on to the next task, because in this life, accomplishment is quiet, and duty is endless. Romance below stairs is a quiet, cautious, and complicated thing, woven from stolen glances and fleeting moments that must never be seen by the wrong eyes. Life in service leaves little room for personal dreams, yet even in the strictest households, the heart finds its own secret pathways. Days are filled with duties, rules, and fatigue, but at night, when footsteps fade and the lamps grow dim, feelings have a way of blooming in silence. Perhaps it begins with nothing more than a shared smile across the servants' hall, small and shy, but warm enough to soften a long day. Sometimes it starts with kindness, a door held open, an extra piece of bread offered without a word, or a brief whisper of encouragement before a difficult task. Affection cannot be spoken aloud, not in a world where discipline rules and the housekeeper notices every unusual glance. So everything unfolds in gestures, like tiny threads of connection woven quietly into the fabric of daily work. A folded note tucked beneath a napkin, waiting to be found. A ribbon forgotten by accident on a chair near the scullery door. A meeting in the garden at dusk, just for a few minutes, just long enough to talk about nothing and everything. Even a simple walk to fetch coal can feel different when someone falls into step beside you, pretending it is coincidence. Yet love below stairs is never without fear, because discovery carries consequences that can end more than a romance. Two people seen alone together can spark gossip, and gossip can travel faster than any bell or footstep. Dismissal, separation, or punishment are always possible, casting long shadows over even the softest emotions. So those who dare to care for one another must become experts at secrecy, timing, and silence. A stolen moment near the pantry. A glance held for one heartbeat longer than propriety allows. A whisper in a corridor when no one else is near. These fragments become memories small, precious, and bright enough to survive even the harsh routine of service life. Some romances manage to endure, growing stronger through whispered promises and shared endurance. Others fade quietly, worn down by exhaustion, rules, and circumstance. But every maid knows that love like dust in a grand house appears even when no one invites it. It may be hidden, denied, or carefully tucked away, but it never truly disappears. For in a life where so much is dictated by duty, the heart becomes the last private space a maid can claim as her own. And even if the future is uncertain, the quiet warmth of connection is enough to carry her through many long days and longer nights. When the house finally sleeps and no more footsteps echo through the halls, a maid is left alone with her thoughts. She lies in her narrow bed, listening to the distant hush of the night, knowing that tomorrow will unfold just like today. The uniform will be tied, the bells will ring, and the chores will begin before the sun has even stretched across the horizon. Service is endless, repetitive, and exhausting, yet she endures it with quiet strength that few will ever see. Every polished step, every folded sheet, every silent task becomes part of a life built on discipline and resilience. There is pride in surviving days like these, even without applause, because survival itself becomes a small, steady victory. No journal records her name, and no portrait hangs above the grand staircase in her honor. But the house stands because her labor holds it together. Piece by piece, hour by hour, from dawn until long past dusk. Her story is not written in ink or newspaper headlines, it is written in clean floors, glowing lamps, and unbroken routine. Though the world above stairs seldom sees her, and rarely speaks her name, she finds meaning in the rhythm she has learned to master. She dreams of gentler days, of open fields, of warm sunlight on her skin, of a life with more freedom and fewer rules. Yet she also dreams of simple things. A kind word, a quiet morning, a letter from home, a full night of sleep without interruption. These small hopes settle in her heart like soft feathers, light but impossible to forget. In the stillness before sleep, she allows herself to imagine a future beyond the walls of service. Perhaps one day she will leave, start anew, and build a life where she chooses her own hours, her own joys, her own path. Until then, she carries on in silence, because endurance has become her greatest skill, and hope her most loyal companion. At last her eyes close, and the weight of the day melts away, leaving only the rhythm of her breath in the darkness. The mansion sleeps. The bells rest. And for a few brief hours, so does she. And so, after walking through the hidden hours of a Victorian maid's world, we return at last to our own quiet, modern night. Behind every polished staircase and glittering chandelier, there were hands that never rested, footsteps that never echoed, and lives that history rarely paused to remember. Their stories were not grand, but they were real, woven from endurance, routine, sacrifice, and the soft resilience of people who gave everything and kept almost nothing. Tonight, as you settle into comfort and calm, perhaps you can feel a little more gratitude for the invisible work that shapes every world, in every era. No matter how small a life may seem, there is strength in showing up, day after day, and hope in dreaming, even quietly, for something more. So now, let your thoughts grow still, let your breathing slow, and let the noise of the day fall gently behind you. The past can rest. And you can rest, too. Thank you for listening, for staying with me until the end, and for giving space to a story so often left in the shadows. If this quiet journey relaxed your mind or sparked your curiosity, I hope you will join me again in the next episode. Until then, good night, take care, and sleep well.